Chapter 6. A Change of Heart. Her name is Samini. When I met her, a lively student in my kindergarten class, she was 5 years old, but looked to be no more than 3. She was thrilled to be learning her alphabet, and she loved to color and sing. When she sang, her little voice was high-pitched and breathy, filled with passion. Now, as she lay filthy on a bed in my house, her boundless energy was drained by disease, malaria. Her bright eyes dulled by hunger, and the dance in her step stilled by the crippling effects of poverty. My heart literally hurt in my chest as I watched her struggle and prayed more intensely than I'd ever prayed in my life. As I sat up late at night trying to keep her alive 1 minute, one breath at a time, I had to ask myself, why do I have so much? And why have I always had so much? Why do my family and friends have so much? And do they even know that far, far away from the luxuries of the Western world, a little songbird of a girl is fighting for her life? The roles could have easily been reversed. I wondered how God had chosen me to be born into such luxury, and this little girl to be born into such hopelessness. I thought, she is a girl with as many hopes and dreams as those who rest peacefully in their air-conditioned houses, protected by alarm systems. Yet her body is on fire with raging fever. My sheets are soaked, and right now she has no one to care for her but me. My heart began to break over and over for the other children around the world who had no one to protect them, no one to speak up for them, no one to sit up with them at night and control their fevers. Who could hold them? Who would sing to them? At some point in the night, Sumini smiled at me. In the dark, her black face blended right in with the night, and all I could see was the flash of her teeth. I knew that Sumini would not die, not that night, because God had put me there to make sure of that. He had put me here to hold her. He had put me there to give her a sponge bath every hour, ibuprofen every 4, and had given me the provision to afford the malaria treatments that her other family members could not. As I continued to pray over Sumini that night, God brought to mind the disciples who, when they encountered a man blind from birth, asked Jesus what the man did to deserve his condition. Jesus replied, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life." John 3:9. Disease is certainly not a sin, and poverty is not a sin. It's a condition, a circumstance that allows God to work, his work to be displayed. As God kept me awake to pray vigilantly for the welfare of the little girl in front of me, something changed in my heart. I knew God wanted me to care for the poor. I had been doing it as best I could for a long time, and had become almost all I did with my life over the past 8 months. It had happened so naturally. I was simply caring for those around me out of an overflow of love for Christ and the love that He had lavished upon me. I never thought I was doing anything different or unusual, just simply what He had asked. But that night, as I laid praying and fighting for this precious little one, and over the next few weeks and months as I pored over His Word, I realized that what I was doing was not simply my choice. It was a requirement. I wanted to give even more. I wanted to do more for the people who needed help, and I wanted others to rise up and do the same. I didn't want to simply care for these people. I wanted to advocate for them. I wanted to raise more awareness for these voiceless, unseen children. I was exploding with new enthusiasm, not just to care for the orphaned and needy children, but to encourage and help others to do the same. I wanted people who were warm under their down comforters to know that there were other children like so many out there, all alone. I wanted to tell her story. I knew we couldn't all just pack up and move to Uganda, but I so desired to make a way for others to help, to care for these children, to do what Jesus requires. I wanted to tell them all about what I had seen and experienced so they would know. I saw over and over and over again in Scripture where God instructs us to do everything in our power to care for children just like these. Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Matthew 19:14. Sumini was to be my sixth daughter. The first month she lived with us, we visited many different doctors, all of whom were concerned that she might not live much longer because of her spleen and liver were so enlarged due to severe malnutrition. Every time we left a doctor's office, I felt discouraged by the prognosis. Sumini, however, never had a discouraged bone in her body. She is a fighter. She would not be beat. And as it turns out, God truly did want His work to be displayed in her life, as her spleen and liver miraculously began to shrink back to normal size. With good feeding and lots of love and nurturing, she once again became a healthy, happy little girl. Sumini is tiny for her age, but has a huge personality to make up for it. She is ever active. I rarely catch her walking, but always running, skipping, jumping, climbing. Sumini is kind and fair. She doesn't ever want anyone to feel left out or left behind. She shares what she has and makes sure those around her always feel included and important. Sumini loves to create and is always making something new. Games, pictures, food, anything. I love watching her heart transform as she learns about Jesus and contributes so much joy to our family. As Sumini joined our family, I knew that one of God's purposes in placing me here was to grow in me, through my children, this heart for adoption. In an effort to be real, I will tell you, it was hard. Being a mother of 6 at age 19 was just plain exhausting sometimes. But God continued to show me that adoption is His heart, and it was becoming mine. Adoption is wonderful and beautiful, and the greatest blessing I could have ever experienced. Adoption is also difficult and painful. Adoption is a beautiful picture of redemption. It is the gospel in my living room, and sometimes it's just hard. As a parent, it's hard not to know when your daughter took her first steps, or what her first word was, or what she looked like in kindergarten. It's hard not to know where she slept and whose shoulder she cried on, and what the scar on her eyebrow is from. It's hard to know for 10 years yours was not the shoulder she cried on, and you were not the mommy she hugged. As a child, it's hard to remember your biological parent's death, no matter how much you love your new mom. It's hard to have your mom be a different color than you, because inevitably people are going to ask why. It's hard that your mom wasn't there for you all the times you had no dinner, all the times you were sick, all the times you needed help with your homework. It's hard when you have to make up your birthday. It's hard when you can't understand the concept of being a family forever yet, because your first family wasn't forever. Adoption is a redemptive response to tragedy that happens in this broken world, and every single day it is worth it, because adoption is God's heart. His word says, in love, he predestined us to be adopted as His sons through Jesus Christ. in accordance with his pleasure and will. Ephesians 1:5. He sets the lonely in families. See Psalms 68:6. The first word that appears when I look up adoption in the dictionary is acceptance. God accepts me, adores me, just as I am, and he wants me to accept those without families into my own. Adoption is the reason I can come before God's throne and beg him for mercy, because he predestined me to be adopted as his child through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace. My family, adopting these children, it is not optional. It is not my good deed for the day. It is not what I'm doing to help out these poor kids. I adopt because God commands me to care for orphans and the widows in their distress. I adopt because Jesus says that to whom much has been given, much will be demanded. See Luke 12:48. And because whoever finds his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for his sake will find it. See Matthew 10:39. God was showing me his heart and his word in new ways, right here in the life I was living through the children I was serving. Armed with this new sense of who he is and who I was as his servant, I continued trying to give myself away in every circumstance. I wanted to do God's work. Let him display himself through my life and change the world as much as possible every single day. Most days that didn't include anything other than people would find impressive. It simply meant being faithful to the people and the responsibility God had given me. I never knew what God was going to do next or whom he was going to bring into my life. I'd learned by now that sometimes people entered my life suddenly, and just as quickly as they entered, they left. I learned to accept them, adopt them into my heart, no matter the circumstance. Some would become part of my world permanently, and others would be in it for just a short season. Some of these people whose lives intersected briefly with mine made a huge impact that will live forever in my heart. One of those was a little girl named Brenda. Brenda was one of the most beautiful children I had ever met. I found her at the main hospital in Jinja where my girls and I went a few times a week to pass out food to patients, pray for them, chat with them, and remind them of the love Jesus has for them. My children loved this time of serving, and we always came home thankful, thanking God. When we went to the hospital, was always moved by how great our God is in the midst of more pain than I could imagine. Sometimes in a particular case touched with special place in my heart, and I knew God was calling my name, asking me to get involved. Brenda's situation was one of these. She was no ordinary little girl. I would have guessed she, at the age of 13, weighed around 40 pounds. She carried much of her weight in her stomach, which was hugely distended, as though she were pregnant with twins. The rest of her body was so thin I felt that it could snap in half with just a touch. We met her on a Monday, lying limp in her rusty hospital bed, hardly able to breathe because of the pain she was in. Under her bed was a bucket containing at least 4 liters of blood the hospital staff had drained from her abdomen. Brenda had been to every government hospital in Uganda, and no one had been able to say what was wrong, why her stomach kept ballooning as the rest of her body seemed to shrink. Not knowing what else to do, I immediately laid my hands on her and began to pray. Within minutes, my 6 girls were huddled around the bed, also lifting their voices to the Lord on behalf of this little girl. Different sizes, different ages, different races, speaking different languages. Each of us in our own way pleaded with God for this little girl's life. I could feel her body shaking beneath my hand as I prayed, and when I moved my hands off her, I could see the outline of where I had touched her. My touch had made her blood come to the surface in the perfect shape of my handprint. I returned to the hospital that evening with dinner for Brenda and her mother, who lay on the hospital floor next to her dying daughter. Overwhelmed with a sense of helplessness, as soon as I walked in, I began praying, exalting God, who was Lord in the middle of what is a room full of dying people, asking Him to heal where it was His will, to at least take away the pain, to wrap us all in His arms, to comfort us in the way that only He can until we have come home to Him. Over the next few days, I continued visiting Brenda several times a day, taking her food or a blanket. As I mentioned, the hospital doesn't supply these things. Praying for her and simply being with her. My girls asked about her eagerly each time I came home, and each continued to pray for Brenda. Although her baffled physicians had done nothing to help her, I went to see her one day and found her condition remarkably improved. The next day she was alert and able to have a conversation with me, and her pain seemed much less severe. The next day she was sitting and laughing, her stomach much less distended. When I asked the doctors what they had done, they insisted they had done nothing. They believed she was better because we had touched her. I assured them that wasn't possible. But it was definitely possible that she was better because Jesus had touched her through someone who asked him to do so. I believe that Jesus told his disciples to heal the sick, and I believe that Jesus works through humans as we open ourselves to him. I had never prayed with such conviction and faith as I did during those days with Brenda. Though I pray with much fervency more frequently now, I by no means have the power to heal, but I know our Almighty Father does. When the day came and I went to the hospital again and found Brenda's room empty, concerned about her, I asked a staff member where she was. The hospital had sent her home because her condition had improved significantly. The little girl I thought would die in my arms had grown steadily better, and the doctors hadn't even touched her. I could believe only what Jesus did. I may never see Brenda again. She left my life as quickly as she entered. She changed me. She strengthened my faith. I pray that she grows into a woman who loves her Maker. I pray that her sickness as a 13-year-old and the miraculous healing she received will strengthen her faith for the rest of her life. Will Brenda remember me when she sleeps on the blanket from my bed? Will she think of the time we spent together? I don't know, but I will never forget. My life was being led with unforgettable experiences. Every day something happened, usually something more heartbreaking or appalling than anything I could ever encounter. I was growing accustomed to it. I knew it was what I was created for. The sense of purpose and fulfillment I felt was nothing short of amazing, and I wanted to immerse myself in this life for the rest of my days. Journal entry, Friday, February 13th, 2009. I cannot, no matter how hard I try, convince my children not to play with trash. They love it. They have some simple toys at our house, and we certainly have plenty of clothes. They still prefer to play with old pill bottles, margarine containers, boxes, and they prefer to wear plastic bags and old towels that we use for mopping the floor. I didn't know why they do this, and much to my dismay, I can't get them to quit. I recently dewormed all of the amazing children, much to my delight. My own children, the medicine comes in individual boxes, which are perfect for use in building all sorts of little cities in the backyard. Sumini has all kinds of adorable dresses, but she chooses to dress in leaves and a towel I use as a mop. Scovia could have a cute little princess purse to carry, but she chooses to make one out of an old plastic bag and use dental floss. I looked outside a couple of days ago and noticed that the biggest bush in our front yard was completely covered in things I had thrown away over the last several days. When I asked Minnie why the bush was covered in trash, she said, "That is my shop. Will you come play?" I proceeded to pick up some stones from our gravel driveway to use as currency and bought lots of trash off my tree. For 6 stones, I got an old pill bottle, a milk carton, a toilet paper roll, and a used calling card. What a deal! My children are Uganda to the core, and I would never seek to change that. At the end of the day, we use a whole lot of soap, but when you have this many children, over 100 more bathing and eating and hanging at your house, the phrase "don't sweat the small stuff" expands to including letting your children play with trash, and sometimes letting the laundry pile into a stack that towers over your head. If today is the only day I am promised, how could I not play tree shop? My goofy, trash loving children are constant reminders of God. They look at things that I see as used, broken, and dirty, and they see treasure. Can you imagine God looks at everyone broken, old, dirty, probably not a whole lot more exciting than an old toilet paper roll, and he sees treasure, something he loves dearly, something he would die for. Wow. Thank you, God, for my trash loving, treasure seeking children. Thank you for so much laughter in the midst of a difficult week. Thank you that when I feel old and used up and broken and no more exciting than a cardboard box, you whisper that you love and value me, and that in your eyes I am shiny and new.